Welcome to What Happens in Vegas. I am your host, Neil Maligno, and we just finished week 2 of the NFL season. Well, it's still happening. I'm actually recording this on Monday, so Monday Night Football hasn't occurred yet, but what's important is our Raiders have played, and it was disappointing. The Raiders, there's no other way to put this, have fallen to 0-2 to start the season. 0-2. You have an improved roster, including the number one wide receiver in all of football. You have a lot of the returning players who mattered, right? All of the key offensive players, all of the key defensive players, including again additions to the team. You have a new head coach who many presume is more modern, more considered a offensive guru than what we had previously last season. We have a whole new coaching staff. You have everything that you can ask for, right? This perfect recipe. You're in Vegas, new stadium, and we're thinking with all these new features, with all this new coaches, new elite wide receiver, things Derek Carr never had. You re-sign guys, you give guys extensions like Darren Waller, Derek Carr, all these guys, and here we are starting the season 0-2, not off to a good start. And of course, as a Raider fan, you're disappointed, you're upset, you're angry. I felt all those emotions. I still feel those emotions right now. Derek Carr is always an easy person to place the blame on. When we look at the stats from week 1, clearly Derek Carr had major issues, right? But when you look at the stats for week 2, you don't see the interceptions and stuff that make it easier for you to want to blame a quarterback. There was a lot of big differences from this game to last week. And we'll get into all of those when we look at the stats here. And we're not going to make this too long. I like to keep these episodes, the recap episodes, short, sweet, to the point. But when you look at the stats from last week, right? Last week was a rough game against the Chargers. This week, the Cardinals, the Raiders. One of the issues with this game actually is that the Raiders started this game 20-0. Right? By halftime, the Raiders had 20 points, Cardinals had 0 points. So you're going into the third quarter, the fourth quarter, the second half of football thinking we're up 20-0, right? That even if the Cardinals went in there, made some adjustments, got the pep talks, and came out and scored some touchdowns, that the Raiders could keep them off, right? Like the Raiders, of course, are going to score some more touchdowns. They already put up 20 in the first half. Well, that's not how it played out. As we know, the Raiders only went on to score 3 more points the entire second half of the game. And it was just bad. It was bad. Kyler Murray was out there making magic happen left and right with his legs, with his arm, guys coming up with big plays. And it just started to feel like it was slipping away, right? Like as things slowed down, it felt like the momentum was just going away for the Raiders, and things were just going the Cardinals' way. Still, a comeback of a 20-point deficit. It didn't feel like it was going to happen. It didn't feel like the way the first half went and the second half the Cardinals were going to do that, right? I was like, okay, Cardinals are going to score some points. Raiders are going to, respond and keep responding enough to hold them off at least, right? Like this for sure wouldn't be the worst, comeback in history for the Raiders organization. That wouldn't happen, right? It did. It did. Right? That was the biggest deficit I believe the Raiders ever lost by by being up 20 points. That was the biggest lead to ever have and lose the lead and lose the game. Let's pull up really quickly here some stats. The Raiders are dead last in the AFC West. We already talked about how difficult this division is going to be. Everyone is aware that the AFC West is one of the best divisions in football. You have the Chiefs that are 2-0 now. You have the Chargers and Broncos who are both 1-1, and the Raiders are 0-2, dead last in the division. Many people are going to say it's just the first 2 games. It's a long season. You went into the season feeling good about the team and the aspirations that the team has. Don't let the first 2 losses like derail your hope. And that's correct. That's accurate, right? Like you can't take those 2 losses and just say the season's over. That's not, the two other teams ahead of you are 1-1. They're 1 game apart right now, right? Like if both those teams lose their next game, they're 1-2, 1-2. Raiders win, they're 1-2. So then it's a 3-way tie there for second. And then the Chiefs are, who knows what at that point? It could be 3-0, could be 2-1. So things aren't really as out of reach or this overreaction that we're having to it. It's just really disappointing to start off 0-2 and have to try to, come up out of that hole. And you can do it. It's not difficult. It's 2 games. But rather than start from a position of 2-0, like the Chiefs, or even 1-1, where things don't feel as bleak, you start 0-2 and it just doesn't feel good. And again, this is why I mentioned at the top of the episode here, all the new things that are happening in Las Vegas, right? You got Josh McDaniels, this guru offensive coach, coming from a winning organization, a championship, type of team. You got Devontae Adams. You got a bunch of returning players and guys who were getting extensions because they were good, because they were great players. A remolded defense in a sense, with new coaching staff there as well, who again, a defensive coordinator people were very high on, right? So everything felt good. And so the 0-2 start is just a smack in the face to the expectations, the high standards, the hopes that we had here for the Raiders coming out of the gate. Can they fix it? Yes. Can they adjust? Yes. Is it too late? No. But when we look at so many things were frustrating about this game, let's jump over to really quick the offensive stats for the game. Derek Carr, 252 and 2 touchdowns. Like I said, no interceptions. So not a great game, but not a horrible game. Josh Jacobs, 69 yards on 19 carries. He looked the best he has all year so far in the first 2 games. I know he had 19 carries, but I feel like you could have kept going to Josh Jacobs in that second half. 1, to waste some clock, but number 2, just to keep things moving. He was moving the ball pretty decently. For you to just roll away from that completely, say what you will. I think they should have kept going there. But now look at the receiving. This is where things get really weird. Last week we talked about Devontae Adams getting stupid amount of targets, just crazy, right? Like it felt like he was the only receiver on the team, which shouldn't be the way it is. He's really good, and he should get a lot of love. He shouldn't get all the love, right? So here this week we come back, and you're thinking, okay, certainly they won't throw him 20 targets, but he's Devontae Adams, right? We always have to respect that he's Devontae Adams. He's one of the best wide receivers in football, if not the best, in my opinion, the best. So you come to this game, you look at it, and you're like, 2 receptions, 12 yards. Sure, it was a touchdown in the opening drive, but 2 receptions, 12 yards after what he did last week. This kind of stuff makes no sense. No sense. And you can say, well, Neil, maybe the defense really focused in on Adams. Of course, defense is always focusing on Adams. That never stops Adams from having big games, being a major impact, a major threat. In this game, he was not a threat. That's just a fact. He was not doing enough. And even if he was, in a sense of, well, he let Mac Hollins get 5 catches for 66 yards. He helped Renfro get 7 receptions for 59 yards. He opens things up for Darren Waller, 6 receptions, 50 yards. No, I get that. I understand that, but it doesn't stop Devontae Adams from having big games, right? So those things should be happening, and Devontae Adams having a big game. So that is very frustrating. The Devontae and Adams numbers, week 1 was frustrating, and now week 2 is frustrating again, because again, they're not finding the sweet spot yet. And we were supposed to go into this, oh, they were college teammates, and they're so used to each other and all these things. Well, so far, whether you want to blame Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, whether you want to blame play calling, which to me is much more reasonable, blaming the coach, blaming Josh McDaniels on this. You don't go from that many targets and receptions the first game to 2 the next game. I mean, there's got to be a middle ground here. There's really a comfortable spot that this should be in, a more, just a better range than, lopsided one way, lopsided the other way. I like that you got Mac Hollins involved and Renfro and these guys, but you got to learn the team has to learn how to get them involved, plus Devontae Adams. And this is probably where, when Derek Carr says stuff like, we have to learn how to win. I know it's this weird saying, and it kind of annoys me as well when you hear it. But we have to understand that when he says that, he's not pinpointing an exact issue. He's not blaming a player or anyone in particular or a coach. He's just saying that we're still trying to figure this thing out, right? And it's an understandable statement to make, although vague. But these are the kind of things he's talking about. Like, we have to learn how to win. Yeah, we have to learn how to use Devontae Adams properly instead of, lopsided from left to right. We have to learn how to use Devontae Adams plus these other guys at a reasonable clip. We have to learn how to keep, using Jacobs in the right situations as it works. He has to learn how to, get familiar. So it's across the board, right? Like this falls on everybody. Um, the thing that gets you is like when you watch Derek Carr in that game, if you just look at these stats, you're like, damn, Derek Carr did pretty good. You go, damn, he did better than Kyler Murray, right? Like that's how you can look at this. But when you watch that game in the second half, there was no comparison. Kyler Murray just had the offense on fire. He was making things happen with his legs, which is super powerful. So these are the kind of things where it can get frustrating when you don't have a quarterback who could run the ball. You don't have a quarterback who's making these crazy plays just happen with their own abilities and what Kyler Murray does is it was looking like magic out there right in the second half. So while the numbers don't necessarily sway in Kyler Murray's direction, he got the win and he did look better at the end of the game. Um, so overall, very, very confusing. The offense still hasn't figured itself out, right? It still hasn't figured out what it wants to do. When we look at the defense for the Raiders, clearly some guys got a ton of tackles here. Uh, Diablo, Brown, Hobbs is crushing it. Hobbs does great out there. He's really becoming the number one cornerback on this team by far. The way he's standing out, I did love to see Harmon step in really well, make some really big plays. The play where he jarred the ball loose at the end, prevent the Cardinals from winning it at that point, which turned out being for nothing. But that was a great play by him. He was doing good stuff. Max obviously got a sack. Chandler Jones, it says 2 QB hits. He still hasn't gotten a sack on the year, I don't believe. I know it's just 2 games, but again, he's been kind of underwhelming to start the season, at least from what, again, maybe we go in with too high of expectations. When they signed him, you're like, wow, this is gonna be a nasty combo. And it just hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. Sometimes you see these great duos and they're like 3 sacks in one game, or they both got a sack each. Like it has to happen. It hasn't happened yet in this case, but I really would love to see when that happens, and I hope it does, right? Like we don't want to keep saying that we want to see it happen. We want to see it happen for Chandler Jones. It was great to see Robertson get an interception. I'm happy for that guy. When we drafted him, a lot of fans were excited about it. The team felt good about it. The organization felt good. It just felt like it was a solid pick. And then since then, he hasn't really done anything. Many fans thought he would get cut or traded, that his moment had passed in terms of them hoping that he would step up and reach this ability and potential that we thought he had. And now this staff is really giving him an opportunity, and it's happening. It's working, right? Like that was a clean interception. Nothing funny about it. It was a legit interception. It was a great play. So it's good to see him making plays out there. Again, the guys that are making good plays, we want to see continue for the year and continue to grow upon it. Rocky Sin looked good out there in a few plays, making deflections. So overall, the defense looks okay. And you're playing the Cardinals and you're playing the Chargers and you're playing these high scoring offensive teams with great quarterbacks, really solid weapons. So defenses are never going to like shut these teams out. Very typically, you're not going to limit these guys from, showing their ability, showing how great they are. You just have to do enough to keep your offense in the game. And in this case, that's how it looked in the first quarter, right? It looked great in the first quarter. And again, the way the first quarter looked and the way things ended is why this was like that double smack in the face, that super hard hit to us as Raider fans, because you had this 20-0 lead. You had this dominant offensive game going. The defense is just dominating, not letting Kyler Murray do anything. And then you turn around the second half and you give up the whole game. You don't score any more points except 3 points on a field goal. And the defense lets all these points just pour in, and you have to imagine some of that is because the offense wasn't scoring anything and was getting off the field way too fast. It just really, really fell apart, and that's why when fans quickly go to trade Derek Carr, cut Derek Carr, he's the worst. What's going on? What's happening? You have to blame the coaches more. You got to blame the coaching staff. You got to blame the play calling. You got to blame these guys who are in charge of this team and what they're doing. And so I put this way more on Josh McDaniels and this coaching staff than any individual player or a group of players, any side of the ball. And that's where I'm basically going to end this. I mean, obviously, we'll have an episode looking at next week to see that the Raiders can turn this thing around. Really excited about the potential. We've seen flashes now, right, between both games. When we look at the stats and we watch the game, we see potential. We see Josh Jacobs looking pretty damn good in week 2. And the team making him the workhorse, giving him basically all the carries. Um, we've seen different wide receivers get involved and Darren Waller and all these guys, and we also seen the big Devontae Adams games. Can we just get all of this at one time is what's going to make this offense and this team a lethal team, a winning team. Until we get that all in the same game, and again, every game can't be totally balanced, but you got to be able to go to these guys. If you even think about other teams in the league, right? Like if you look at the Dolphins this past week, Tua went crazy in this comeback, and he's throwing the ball to Jalen Waddle and he's throwing the ball to Tyreek Hill. He got them both 150 plus yards each, 2 touchdowns each. Like Devontae Adams is capable of that kind of stuff, right? Like you just get the ball to him. So no, you don't have to throw 20 targets his way, but when the game is falling apart and you're quickly falling behind, you go to the true and tried source, which is working in the game, which is Josh Jacobs, and you get the ball to guys like Devontae Adams, who are game changers. You don't throw 2 receptions to him. You don't only give him 2 receptions. That's not acceptable. So hopefully the Raiders, as this season prolongs, as we continue to move forward, and hopefully it happens quickly, they figure this offense out. They get it together. The defense, continues to make strides, and guys continue to impress in their opportunities. The guys who weren't doing much in the past, and guys who were signed with a lot of money to make a gigantic impact. And again, stats don't tell the whole story, right? You don't have to have a sack in a game to be a terror all game. You don't have to have an interception to not have been to be playing great at cornerback all game against their wide receiver. You don't have to have 7 touchdowns to be a great quarterback in the game. But those kind of things are indicative and signs that something is happening right. And so you want that to happen sometimes. But when it doesn't happen, when you don't have this outburst of crazy stats, off the wall stats, 150-yard games, 2 touchdowns from a wide receiver, or 150 rushing yards, and all these crazy things, you want to see a balance, a balanced offense. And so that's what this team needs to get to. It was like 2 different games this week. Very frustrating, very, very frustrating. And as Raider fans, you have this history of recent past where things can go wrong and have a lot of losing seasons and having the lead and then losing it. Like I understand that players, as fans, we're like kind of accustomed to this. But we're again, there's no reason for this team not to improve. There's no reason for this coaching staff not to get better. Remain hopeful, stay positive. Going into this season, we expected things to be better, right? Like so, there's no reason for that not to happen this season. This team should definitely be improving, and they should be definitely making strides. And I think as we go here, even though losses are lessons, right? As long as this team learns from it, and I think I see it was a Foster Moreau quote where he said like, there's gonna be negatives and stuff from this game, and when you watch the film and all that kind of stuff, but you can't let every thought be negative. It's not the exact quote, but that was the point of what he was saying. And I've seen other players say, or even the coach, I believe it was, where like we can't all of a sudden think we're not the team who we thought we were, right? Like I think Derek Carr mentioned, like we're still a winning team, we're still a team who we think is great. We just got to go out there and prove it. And so I believe the Raiders will do that. I believe this will turn around. And trust me, I'm not one of these fans who are optimistic just to be optimistic. I am biased, of course. I'm a Raider fan, but I was super upset yesterday, so I could relate to anybody out there, any other Raider fans who felt that way. I was as shocked as you were. I was as pissed as you were with the outcome. But let's remain positive. We've seen some good things from both games, and let's hope that by learning how to win is finding a balance in this offense and on this defense, and putting it all together in a really good way that turns out a lot of wins, right? And so we'll see next week. We'll see you in week 3. We'll look ahead to that at some point. But this is the recap for week 2. The Raiders are 0-2. That's not a good start for the AFC West. It's not a good start for any division, but it's really a bad start for the AFC West. It's not a good start. But let's not look at it as some kind of bad omen that it's over, that the season's over. It's 2 games. We have plenty of time. Let's look at the positives. Let's hope this team finds balance. Let's hope the coaching staff is able to figure it out. Let's hope that some guys have some really big moments here where they step up and make plays when required. And we'll see you guys in week 3. Well, we'll talk about next episode. We'll talk about week three's game. All right, guys, that's it for me today. As always, make sure you hit like and subscribe here on YouTube. And if you're just listening to the audio version, please hit subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. Leave us a review. Jump in the comments. We respond to all the comments in there. So if you guys leave any comments, we love talking about Raider football. Or you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and all those good places at What Happens in Vegas. We're out.